Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, January 18th, 2023, and it's 3:00 p.m. And that means it's time for Women in Business. I am looking at this jacket I wore and I'm thinking, I don't know if that was a good choice or not. I think that about a lot of my clothes, but I'm going to try not to fidget with it during the um, show or the necklace either, because that's something new as well. Um, if there ever is a podcast version of this, I'm wearing a choker for the first time and it's a little interesting. And the jacket, I don't feel is hanging quite the way I want it to, but it doesn't seem to want to cooperate. So now that we're done with my wardrobe woes, and seriously, I need someone to dress me, I think. One reason to get like a major show is there are people who will give you clothes, because I worry about it. And that actually a little bit, funnily enough, factors into what we're talking about today, which is rejection. And as I said in the description, when I wrote about the topic I was going to talk about today, hat tip to Nicky Adamkiewicz, who mentioned this in her group, The Sassy Subber. And I thought, oh, that's a really good topic. And I know something about this topic, both how to deal with rejection well and how to deal with it badly. And so I thought, okay, that's a good thing to talk about. Maybe what I've learned and the work that I've done on this topic could help some other people. And as anyone who's watched this show previously knows, helping people is pretty much what I'm looking at doing here, if at all possible. So let's start with, as we often do, not the history of rejection, because I don't think there is necessarily such a thing, but what rejection is and what it does. And rejection at its simplest form is basically you not getting something you wanted. Maybe you asked somebody out on a date and they said no, or maybe you applied for a job and you didn't get it, or you were pursuing a client and the client went with somebody else, or you were trying to land this huge job and they decided that they wanted to go with another company, or you're a writer or a sculptor or a poet or whatever, and poets are writers, so that's the same thing. But and you sent your work out to somewhere and they said, no, thank you, we're not interested, or we don't want it, or they didn't say anything, they just sent it back to you. And that's all rejection. So basically, rejection is just I put myself out there in some way and I didn't get the result I wanted. That's basically what it is. But what rejection does to you, especially if it happens when you're a kid, and when you're a kid, rejection can come in the form of being picked last for the team, being bullied or teased, being ostracized from a friend group that you want to join. It could happen in your family if there's a child that's obviously the favorite and it's not you, or if you're told that your acceptance in the family group is predicated on certain behaviors or certain ways of being or whatever it is. Any of that can be rejection. And what the difference is between being rejected when you're an adult and being rejected when you're a kid is when you're a kid, your opinion of yourself and what you think about your place in the world and your worthiness and whether or not people should like you is being formed. And if what happens to you is you're consistently being told you aren't good enough for this group, you need to behave in a certain way, or you're not going to be loved in this family, whatever it is. And there's myriads of ways that you can experience rejection as a kid. But what that does to you, if you're not taught how to deal with it, and if you don't have a support system in place that kind of buoys you up and helps you understand what rejection is and what it means, is you tend to take those things to heart. And you end up with low self esteem. You end up thinking that rejection is part and parcel of you, that you're not good enough. And so therefore you're being rejected. You start taking rejection really personally, which is what I did for a really, really long time. Some of you know from past shows, and I'm not going to go over it again, but I had a rough childhood, among other things, and in a lot of ways. And I grew up into an adult who was pretty much sure that she was not worthy of anything. And I grew up as an adult that was pretty much sure that I wasn't going to get what I wanted. It wasn't even really worth trying, that I couldn't aspire to the man that I wanted to date because he wouldn't take a second look at me. So therefore I had to settle for the people I ended up dating, which was really not a good plan. And so on and so forth. I couldn't put my writing out there because people wouldn't want to buy it. I couldn't go for the job I wanted because people wouldn't take me, and, whatever it was. And I also took rejection really personally. If I didn't get something, I'd get angry. I'd get down on myself. I'd get angry at the people who had rejected me for whatever the reason. And I always assumed it was me. I never thought that there could be any other reason. It was about me. And really that's one of the major traps, I think, of dealing with rejection, is it's really easy to fall into the idea that it's all about you and what you did or didn't do and what you have or don't have and how your worthiness or non-worthiness. And a lot of times rejection has absolutely nothing to do with you except you happen to be in a circumstance at the time. But another thing that being rejected consistently can do is it tends to make you, I'm trying to think of the right way to put this, gun shy maybe, or predisposed to reject things before they reject you. I was the queen, and still am somewhat, I'm sad to say, of leaving people before they left me. Because I grew up in a family that basically said, if you don't behave in this way, if you do these things, which basically meant if you talk about anything that's bothering you, if you have any opinions that are not our opinions, if you do anything that we take badly, then we're going to stop loving you. And that's it. So I had a tendency to just assume that there was something fundamentally wrong with me and nobody was going to want to be in my life long term. So I would dump you before you dumped me. The minute it looked like things might be going south a little bit, I was gone and you would never hear from me again. And I did this to friends. I did it to family members. I did it to people who I'm very sad are not in my life anymore. But I understand why they're not, because I just completely went, whoops, poof, I'm gone. And that was me being scared they were going to leave me. So my defense for that, instead of trying to deal with it and talk about it and learn from it, and maybe even be open enough to tell the people in question, I'm scared of this. And I need to know that you're going to be here long term. I didn't do that. What I did was, oh, we had a fight, or, oh, you looked bored when you talked to me. So therefore, I'm just going to ghost. I'm gone. We're done. And it was kind of like preemptive pain a little bit. It was like, I know you're going to hurt me. So I'm going to hurt myself first so that you can't. Because in my twisted brain at the time, that sounded better. I don't really get it. But this is part and parcel of what being rejected when you're a kid does to you. You know it's going to be painful and you think it's inevitable. You don't see a path where people stick with you. You don't think you're worth it. So that's still something I'm dealing with, and I'll be honest about that. I wish that I had that one under control. I don't. I think the first part of the battle was recognizing it And I think if you are hearing some of yourself in the pattern that I described, that's something that you need to recognize too, that it's if your instinct is as soon as things get rough, you're out the door, or if you're not even trying to form relationships or friendships because you're just sure that it's going to end horribly, then you need to take a look at that, because some of that may be the people you're choosing to try to form relationships or friendships with. But the other half of it could be that you're predisposed to assume it's not going to work 5 minutes into the relationship. That doesn't get you anywhere. So dealing with rejection has a myriad of ways you can go about it. Everybody experiences rejection in their own way. Some people have to do a lot of work to recognize their patterns. That was me. Some people deal with it naturally better because they had a different and maybe more supportive upbringing, or they have a more resilient personality, or whatever it is. But there are things you can do if you know that dealing with rejection is an issue for you. And I wanted to talk about some of those today because that's why you're all here. So let's start with the first one. The first thing that you can do is acknowledge and grieve. And basically that means you have a right to say, yes, I'm hurt I didn't get that job. Yes, I'm hurt I didn't win that award. Yes, I'm hurt the guy that I asked out didn't want to go out with me, or went out with me once and then said, you know what, I don't think we suit. You're allowed to say that was painful. You're allowed to be sad about it. You're allowed to eat a pint of ice cream or binge watch your favorite show, or, huddle under a blanket and cry, whatever you want to do. You're allowed to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Rejection hurts. I think anybody who has experienced it, and we all have at some point or another, knows that rejection is something that makes you sad. That makes you need to take the time to let that happen. And I mean, don't wallow in it. Don't spend hours and days and weeks wallowing over the fact that you didn't get the job, or you didn't sell the poem, or you didn't sell the story, or you didn't win the award, or you didn't get the date, whatever it is. But take some time and acknowledge that you have a right to be sad about this. And I like this question or this comment from Wendy. I still protect myself from rejection. I know lots of people, but only a few know me. Oh, Wendy, I so identify with that. You have no idea. If no one gets close, I can't be hurt by them. My motto. Oh man, Cindy or Wendy, you and I need to go and have a drink somewhere, because I think we're kindred spirits, I gotta say. But it does hurt you when someone leaves you. And if you have enough hurt of that type, it's easier to just say, I'm not letting anybody close to me, and then I don't have to feel this anymore. So you need to take the time to say, I got rejected and it sucked. I got rejected and my feelings are hurt. I got rejected and I'm sad. And let yourself feel that. We talked, was it last week? Gosh, I can't even remember anymore. But I talked a while back about eating your feelings. And that was what I did for a really long time. When I was sad, when I was hurt, when I got rejected, chocolate cake won't reject me. Or I'll make, a pot roast and eat 3/4 of it, or I'll get a pizza and eat the whole thing. And that won't reject me. Well, it's an inanimate object. It can't reject me. So, but that's not the way to handle it. The way to handle it is to feel the feelings, whatever they are. Be angry, be sad, be wistful, be whatever it is that you need to be. Allow that feeling to be acknowledged. Give yourself the right to feel it. Be sad or angry or whatever you need to be, and then pick yourself up and move on. Rejection is going to happen to all of us. If every rejection that happens to you takes you to the mat every time, then you're going to have a rough time of it. At some point, you just have to go, okay, This is what happened. I'm acknowledging that it happened. I'm feeling whatever feelings that brings up in me. And then I'm going to move on to the next thing. And once you do that, a lot of the power of rejection is gone. Yeah, the risk is still there. Every time you put yourself out there, it's a risk. And sometimes if you've had enough pain in a particular area, relationships might be one, you may decide, you know what, it's just easier not to have close relationships. It's just easier not to take that risk. The downside of that is that if you don't take that risk, you don't have supportive relationships in your life. You don't have people you can count on. You don't have closeness and intimacy and all the things that people are conditioned to want. So the other thing you have to acknowledge is if you make the choice not to venture into a particular area, then you're giving up whatever the potential benefits of that area could be. Like, I haven't dated and I couldn't tell you how long. It's been a long time. And the thought of putting myself out there is terrifying. I'm not going to lie. But I have to acknowledge that choosing not to put myself out there precludes me ever finding a romantic relationship. And I know people who have romantic relationships who are really good, where the relationship is really good and they are, happy and fulfilled and supported. And I want that because humans are conditioned to want that. So there's a price to be paid for saying, I don't want to risk getting rejected, or I don't want to risk liking this person and them not liking me. And the price that I pay is, if I don't take the chance, I'm never going to have that type of relationship. And if I decide that I still want that, then how do I get it? As a friend of mine said to me one time, Prince Charming is not going to show up and sit on your doorstep. You're going to have to get out there. I kind of hated him for that, but he's not wrong. So if you decide you want to take the chance, one of the things you need to do is strengthen your resiliency. That means your ability to bounce back when you do get rejected. As I said, feel the feelings and grieve whatever happened if you need to. Grieve the loss of the job. Grieve the relationship that didn't work out. Whatever it is. Give yourself some time to do that. But then get up off the mat and move forward and pursue the next thing. This is one of the things that I think we can all take a kind of a lesson from people who do creative arts, artists, actors, writers, dancers, singers, any of those people, because rejection is part of doing that work. I can put my hand up to that too. You submit an article and the publication doesn't want it. You go to an audition and they tell you they're looking for someone who's a different type. You enter a piece in a contest and you don't win. Rejection is part of doing any kind of creative work, unfortunately. And if you're going to be a writer or a painter or a sculptor or a singer or an actor or a dancer or any of that kind of stuff, you just have to accept that you're probably going to sop up a lot of rejection before you get anywhere useful. It's just how it goes. And if you want to be successful, you have to wade through that rejection. So a lot of people who do that kind of work just treat it as an occupational hazard. There are going to be people who aren't going to like my poem. There are going to be people who are going to pick me for the chorus line. There are going to be shows that aren't going to want me in the cast. It's just how it is. But if you put yourself out there enough times, the law of averages say some of them have got a hit. And hopefully it's the ones you want. Sometimes it isn't, but hopefully it is. And that is what resiliency means, is basically, I know I'm going to get knocked down, but I'm going to get back up and I'm going to try the next thing. And this is also, with resiliency also comes realizing that there's a zillion opportunities out there. I use this word, I feel like, a lot lately, and I don't love it that I do, but it's kind of the word you need to use, which is abundance. We limit ourselves. We think that this thing is the only thing. This job is the only job. This publication is the only publication. This client is the only client. If I don't get this, my life is forever ruined. No. And the old dating cliche, there are millions of fish in the sea. It's true. There are. Now, granted, maybe only one of those fish is for you, but you only need one. So you need to learn to take the hit and bounce back. And I was really bad at this for a really, really long time. Every rejection was personal, and I thought it just was kind of cementing or kind of confirming what I already thought about myself, which was I was worth nothing, and why would anybody want to deal with me? And, nobody was interested in me, blah, blah, whatever. And I had to learn to just go, okay, that wasn't my thing. Be sad about it, acknowledge that it hurt me, do whatever I needed to do to process it, and then get back up and move on. And one of the things that helps with that is if you are doing something creative, or if you are looking for clients or whatever it is, have a list of places that you can approach so that you can see literally right in front of you that this one thing is not the only thing. If you have 15 publications on your list, if one says no, there's 14 more. If you're a brick and mortar and you look at all the businesses in your town and you make a list of 10 you want to target, if one says no, there's 9 more. And there's probably 50 more after that. But you have in front of you concrete proof that this opportunity that didn't happen is not the only opportunity. And that's huge. And that's the thing that gets you off the mat, because, okay, plan A didn't work. I'll try plan B. And then I'll try plan C. And then I'll try plan D. And there's 26 letters in the alphabet. And if I need to, I can double them up. So I can try plan double A and plan double B. Eventually, something's going to hit. And yeah, it's not fun to put yourself out there and put yourself out there and put yourself out there and not get what you want. But if you never put yourself out there, you're definitely not going to get what you want. And that, strangely enough, was one of the things that really, it was a concept that was so simple, but it blew my head apart when I really thought about it. If I don't try, then I'm guaranteed I'm not going to get what I want. Guaranteed. If I put myself out there and try, I may get shot down, but I may not. And if I do get shot down, I'm no worse off than I was before. But if I don't, I have something I've wanted forever that I may not have gotten. Now, granted, I have not applied that to romance yet, but in other areas of my life, I have. So some things are still a work in progress, but working on getting more resilient and bouncing back when rejection happens to you can be really, really helpful. Next thing, for God's sakes, know your patterns. And this is something that I had to do a lot of work to figure out. One of my patterns is the thing I was talking about earlier. I have a tendency, the second a relationship gets rocky, to go, well, this is going to end badly. It's all going to go down in flames. I'm just going to leave now so that I make the choice and I don't have to sit in the wreckage when somebody leaves me. That's my pattern. It's a pattern I've had pretty much my whole life. It's done a lot of damage to my life, sadly. And a lot of people that were pretty awesome people are no longer in my life because I made the choice to leave, basically. That's a pattern. Now, the other half of knowing your pattern is taking steps to fix it if it's detrimental to you. This is the part that people have problems with. Go figure. Knowing your pattern is really helpful, but it isn't as helpful if you don't do anything to change it. Again, this is something I'm still working on in the area of relationships. I'm still not great at it. But I know what the pattern is, and I can recognize the triggers, and I can recognize the behavior. And I now have ways to try to subvert that behavior or deal with it. I'm not always great at it, but I'm trying to do it. And it could be your pattern when you try for a job and you don't get it, or when you audition for a play and you don't get the part, that you just go, well, that's it. I'm not doing it anymore. It's not worth it. If that's your pattern, then you need to look at it in terms of, what are we doing? What am I doing that is detrimental to me? And what do I think I'm saving myself from? In my case, when I run from people, I think I'm saving myself from inevitable hurt. But I don't know that. It could just be a blip in the road. It could be they're having a bad day and it has nothing to do with me. I don't know that because I don't talk. I don't ask. I don't say, you know what? I'm getting a weird vibe. What's going on? Because my go-to assumption is, oh, they hate me. They don't want to be around me. They think I'm boring. They think I'm needy. They think I'm whatever. And yeah, that's all echoes of stuff that I was told a long time ago in another world when I was really another person. But it still is with me. So I know that pattern in myself. And once you know the pattern, you can take the steps to fix it. But that's the important part. A lot of people get stuck. I've talked to people who've been to therapy and they say, oh yeah, I totally understand everything I do now. I'm like, well, have you stopped doing it? Have you fixed it? Well, no, I just went so I could figure out why I did it. But if you're doing something that is impacting you negatively, don't you think it would be better to maybe like change it? Fix it? And so don't get so caught up in, oh, I know why I do that now, that you forget that you need to stop doing it. And that sounds really like, well, no kidding. But for a lot of people, it's like they seem to have this theory that if I figure out why I do something, then I've solved it. And that's only half the problem. If you're doing something that's impacting you negatively, you have to fix it. You have to stop doing it. You have to pick new modes of behavior. So if you think therapy is done, if you just figure out why, you're wrong. The other half of it is, what do I do about this? And trust me, this is a stumbling block I have fallen over a couple of times and probably am still falling over, but I'm trying not to anymore. Which leads us to our next point. I've said trying a lot in this little talk, and that's really what it is. Keep trying, and keep trying on two levels. One level is, if you have identified your pattern, keep trying to change it. Keep trying to fix behaviors that you know are not serving you. And that's a process. That isn't something that you go, oh, I leave people because I'm scared. Well, I just won't do that anymore. Yeah, that doesn't work. I can't just say I'm not going to do it anymore and then not do it anymore, because it's not really a brain thing. I don't know what it is, but it's a spirit thing. I don't even know what triggers it, but it's not working out of my intellectual brain. Let's put it that way. So I can't just say, oh, well, I understand it now, so therefore it's done. I can't do that because it's not true. So I need to keep trying to fix the pattern. If you have a pattern in your life that you can look at and say, okay, when I don't get the job, then I badmouth the client to everyone I know, the potential client to everyone I know. And then it gets back to them and I get a bad reputation. You can't just say, oh, well, I understand why I do that because I didn't get picked for the kickball team in 6th grade. You have to say, oh, I understand why I do that, and here's why and how I'm going to keep that from happening in the future. So that's number one of keep trying. Number two piece of keep trying is just keep trying. If you send out an article to a magazine and they don't take it, send it out to another magazine. If you ask somebody out on a date and they don't say yes, then look around and see who else you might want to ask out on a date. Or ask friends to set you up with someone, or go online to a matchmaking site, whatever it is. If you're pursuing a client and the client doesn't want to go with your company for whatever the reason, then pick someone else. Pitch to someone else. Pitch to a lot of someone else's. Figure that the law of averages means the more people you reach out to, the more likely you are to get the response that you want. And know that not every swing is going to be a hit. And certainly not every swing is going to be a home run. Those may be few and far between. But if you swing more often, the likelihood that you're going to hit more balls and get more home runs is higher. And that's a baseball. That's a baseball metaphor, which my friend Steve would totally love, but he's corrupted me. But that just made me laugh. Sorry. But that's the reality of the situation. Rejection is going to happen to you. There's nobody that gets through this life without being rejected in some way. What really matters is what you do when the rejection happens. Do you quit? Do you find your blankie and curl up in bed? Do you eat your weight in pizza? What do you do? Or do you say, you know what, that really sucked and I'm hurt and I'm sad and I'm going to take the day and then tomorrow I'm going to do something else. When I was dealing, and when I deal with depression, which happens on occasion, I always had a rule. The rule was I had to do one thing a day. And it sounds weird, but the idea behind it was I could be sunk in the most hideous depression ever. And I was sad and nothing mattered and the world was gray and everything sucked and I didn't want to do anything. But I would make a list of here's things I can do to advance my work or my life or something about me in some way. Maybe it's exercise, maybe it's send an email to someone, maybe it's send out a piece of work, whatever it was. And I had to do one thing. I just had to do one thing. And it could be a 5-minute thing, it could be a 10-minute thing, it could be a half an hour thing. Depended a little bit on how I felt, but I had to do one thing. And once I did that one thing, if I wanted to lie on the couch and binge Netflix for the rest of the day, I could, guilt-free, because I did my one thing. But I had to do that one thing. And crazily enough, what happened a lot of the time was doing that one thing would either bring in a good response or get me something I wanted or advance my goals in some small way. And it was a little bit of light. Now, I'm not going to tell you anybody who's ever dealt with clinical depression knows that your outside circumstances really don't have much to do with it. But not sinking entirely, sending those little buoys or beams of hope out there helped me. It works. It worked for me anyway. So that's what I mean. Just keep pushing forward. Don't get so mired in whatever happened that you just decide that it's hopeless and you're not doing anything again. Because that's the worst. At that point, you're done. There's nothing you can do. And who needs that? So keep trying. Even if it seems like you're not getting anywhere. You never know what seeds you're planting. You never know what possibilities are out there. And even if you think you're not worth it, or even if you think you're not worthy, you're wrong. I'm just going to say it. Because I was the queen of not worth it and not worthy. You're wrong. We're all worth it. We're all worthy. Just going to say that right up front. The next thing, and oh man, was I the queen of this. Don't dwell or obsess. And by dwell or obsess, I mean, why didn't he like me? Did I laugh too much? Did I eat too much? Is my hair funny? Am I ugly? Was I too forward? Was I too shy? Gee, did he hear something nasty about me? Maybe I should text him. Maybe I should call him. Maybe I should explain that that wasn't really me, and if he just tells me what he likes, I'll be that. Boy, I wonder if maybe I should go by where he works. Maybe I should take him something. Think he'd like chocolate? Maybe cake? Maybe flowers? Gee, I don't know. That's dwelling. That's obsessing. That's insane. Rejection happens to all of us. It's something that we have to deal with, and spending time mulling over every last detail of why something didn't happen is just, it's useless. There's no point to it. It didn't happen. It doesn't matter why it didn't happen. And 99% of the time, what you're going to conclude is that it's something about you. Oh, when I went to that job interview, I wore blue shoes and I should have worn black. Or he asked me that question about what my weakness is, and I gave him a really dumb answer. And you assume that it's something about you that caused this to happen. And maybe the job that you interviewed for was always going to go to the boss's niece, but they had to interview other people to make it look like it was fair. Or maybe the guy that you had a date with was dating again after a really hard breakup, and he really wasn't interested, but he was trying to put himself out there anyway. And he wasn't ready yet. And after he dated you, he went, gosh, she was really nice, but I'm just not ready for this. And he may never tell you that. But it could be the reason, which wasn't anything to do with you. It had to do with him. And when we dwell or obsess, basically what we're doing is looking for the fault in ourselves that we think we can fix that's going to make rejection not happen to us. And the problem is, it often isn't about you. And if it is about you, it could just be that it wasn't the right time, or you just didn't click with that particular person, or they don't like your style of writing, or they decided to go with a shop down the street because they were cheaper and you wouldn't lower your prices that low, or whatever it is. But if you spend all your time dwelling and obsessing about why you didn't get the award, why this guy didn't like you, or this woman didn't like you, or whatever it is, you're not getting anywhere. It's basically like quicksand. You're just sinking lower and lower and lower as you thrash around trying to make it make sense, instead of just going, well, that didn't work out. Time to move on to the next thing. And knowing the why doesn't really make it better. Especially if the why really is you. Does that make it better? If you go up to the guy who didn't want a second date and he says, you know what? I don't like you. Is that going to make you go, oh, well, okay, I get it now? No, you're going to feel even worse. So what's the point of that? How does that help things? So don't dwell, don't obsess, and don't assume it's about you. Because oftentimes being rejected is about everything but you. So don't carry that burden, because like I said, there's no winning this one. You're just going to mire yourself in this sticky black tar of low self-esteem and feeling like crap. And who needs that, honestly? Accept that the rejection happened. Grieve it as much as you need to. Move on. That's what you do. Don't get stuck dwelling or obsessing. And I was the queen of this for years. I was going to change everything about myself for everyone to get what I thought I wanted. And I'm so glad that I'm over that now, and I'm just me, and you can take me or leave me. That's much better, I gotta say. Reframe rejection is our next little point. And here's the theory behind this. Rejection is not the end of life as you know it. Rejection does not mean that you're awful. Rejection does not mean that you're unworthy or unlovable or any of the uns that we attach to ourselves. All rejection means is in this particular situation or with this particular person, things didn't work out. That's all it means. And you also need to look at rejection. And this is something that, weirdly enough, really, really helped me think about rejection in a different way, which is, hey, I tried. I put myself out there. I was vulnerable. I did something that scared me. And maybe it didn't work the way I wanted it to, but man, look at the chance I took. Look what I did. That's awesome, because I wouldn't have done that before. So reframe rejection in that scenario, and it becomes a totally different thing. It's almost like a badge of honor. Look, I put myself out there. I did something that scared the pants off of me, but I did it. And maybe I didn't end up with the job, or maybe I didn't sell the story, or, maybe the client didn't pick my business, but hey, I tried. And, the client said, even though they didn't go with us, it was a really good pitch. And the editor said, even though they didn't take the story, they thought it was really well written, and they hope that I show them more stories in the future. So I got somewhere. I got something. Maybe I didn't get everything I wanted, but maybe I opened a door. Or maybe I learned something from it that's going to help me do better pitches in the future. Reframe the fact that you got rejected. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. It doesn't have to blow up your universe. You don't have to be sad about it for the rest of your life. You can look at it and say, I tried. And that's a huge thing for me. Made a heck of a lot of difference in my life, I gotta say, to realize that I had tried something. And even if it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, I'd put myself out there, and I'd been vulnerable, and I'd made an effort, and I'd learned something from it. And that really makes a ton of difference, because rejection then doesn't become this horrible, awful thing that just crushes you. It's more like, it really is more like a badge of honor. It's more like, I made myself vulnerable. I tried something that scared me. And yeah, maybe I didn't get what I wanted out of it, but I got something, even if it's just knowing that I can make an effort and survive it if it doesn't work out. That's a huge thing. And I'm shaking my head, because it still makes me laugh a little bit how much of a difference that made to me when I started looking at things that way, and how much happier I was when I wasn't taking everything as though it was an indictment of my personality and my abilities and my desires and, just me in general. When I was just looking at it as, hey, I put myself out there and it didn't work out, but look what I got out of it. And there are a ton of cliches that, any chance you don't take is a no, or any shot you don't take is a missed shot. I think that's Wayne Gretzky. I don't know. And I could have totally mangled that quote, and it's all true. If you don't put yourself out there, you're automatically being rejected. You're rejecting yourself, really, because you aren't having confidence in your talents and your abilities. So reframe what rejection means to you. Look at it as, I was vulnerable. I took a shot, because it really makes a difference. Really, really does. And finally, what I do with this show every week with a lot of the stuff that happened to me, find the lesson. What can we learn from this? Can we learn that we need to study a little harder before we make pitches? Can we learn that we need to ask better questions about why we were rejected? Can we learn that rejection isn't so bad? Can we learn that rejection isn't always about us? What's the lesson? What do we get out of this experience? Sometimes the experience is, okay, I don't need to deal with you anymore, and I'm not going to. And that's not a bad thing. I think what we need to do is just realize that everything can be a learning experience if we let it. And sometimes we need to be analytical enough to look at the experiences we're having and try to figure out what it's supposed to teach us. And I'm not a everything happens for a reason person. Oh God, I want to punch people when they say that, because I don't believe everything does happen for a reason. I think things just happen sometimes, and there's awful things, and they just happen. And I don't believe that there's a divine plan, and I don't believe that we're all predestined to be or have certain things. I don't think any of that's true. But I do think there are lessons we can learn. And one of the ways, weirdly enough, that I've redeemed some of the things that were really painful in my life was by looking at the lessons and then sharing those lessons with other people. That's what works for me. It may not work for you. But if you're getting rejected, and if you're getting rejected repeatedly, what's the lesson in it? And maybe the lesson is you do need to do something differently. Or maybe the lesson is you do need to look at changing certain aspects of how you interact with others or how you think about yourself. That's entirely possible. But if you don't spend the time trying to figure out what the lesson is, you're never going to know. And unexamined lives are lives not worth living. That's a quote from somebody. I don't remember who. But really, you have to spend time figuring this stuff out. And you have to look at rejection as just another tool in your toolbox. The more you put yourself out there, the more rejection is going to happen. It's just a fact of life. But equally possibly, the more that you're going to get what you want, the more you're going to accomplish your goals, the more you're going to learn and grow and become the person you want to be. And that's a pretty good trade-off, I think, when you really look at it. You're trading, if you don't pursue what you want to do, you're trading safety for possibility. And don't get me wrong, I like me some safety. After all the chaos that I've lived through at various times in my life, being calm and safe is nice. But at the same time, if I don't shake things up every once in a while, if I don't take a risk, if I don't get rejected, then I'm never going to get to the next level. And I want to get to that next level. So I have to learn how to handle rejection, which is what I was talking about here today. I hope you all got something out of it. I appreciate all of you who are here to listen. As I do every week, it means a lot to me. You guys really don't know, because this is, weirdly enough, therapy hour for me sometimes. And it helps to be able to share some of what I've learned and what I know. So I appreciate you all for being here. I hope the rest of your Wednesday and the rest of your week is amazing. And I should also say, there are some guests who are starting to book. I'm working on it slowly. Again, talk about fear of rejection. It's a little tough to put yourself out there and ask people to give you an hour or so of their time, but I'm working on it. Thank you all for being here. I will see you next Wednesday, and I appreciate each and every one of you, and I really, really hope that you got something out of this today. Thank you for watching.